All right, it is Sunday again, and again it is time for me to record a podcast episode. I've been looking forward to this. And then 2 days ago, I got sick. So, as you can hear, my voice is a little bit suffering. When I woke up this morning, I could barely speak, but then, as you go along with your day, it gets a little bit better. I got my cup of tea here, so that helps a little bit. So sorry if my voice is a little bit rusty, and I think I'm also not gonna go the full hour this day today with the podcast, simply because I want to rest my voice a little bit so it gets better tomorrow and the upcoming week. But I figured once you decide to do something regularly, you gotta stick with it, and actually it's not as bad as I first thought when I woke up this morning. So I think it's still worth continuing with the podcast regularly every single Sunday and not making an exception just because I'm a little bit sick here, right? So yeah, the sickness obviously also got in the way with the training schedule that I'm on. Last week on the podcast, I mentioned the Christmas liftoff that I'm doing with my buddy. So I've been training really hard for this, and actually I think the fact that I trained really, really hard for this, like every time I went to the gym, I really went all out. I think that could definitely contribute to me getting a little bit sick now. That plus the fact that now it's getting really cold here in Sweden, and it's like -3 degrees at least every day. So I think my body is just not adjusted to that. But the training definitely didn't help. Because when you're doing heavy lifting, you really have to make sure that you give your body enough time to regenerate. Like you need to recover. You have to have a long recovery time when you do really heavy lifts. And I noticed in the past that when I don't do that, I can really feel the effects on my body. So I will definitely pay even more attention to that the upcoming weeks before the liftoff. And I'm gonna make sure now that when I'm sick, I don't overtrain. Yesterday morning, actually, I wanted to go train anyways, and I started the bench press, and I didn't even go as heavy as I wanted to go. I went with like 60 kilos, which on a normal day should really not be any problem at all. But I was lying under there, suffering, trying to get it over my head. And usually I do like 10 reps with 60 kilos, no problem. But yesterday I could barely do 2. So at that point I realized, okay, this doesn't make any sense. I shouldn't force it. So instead I turned this gym session into a long sauna session, which also felt good. And you have an excuse to not train, so you just go straight to the sauna, straight to the recovery part of the training. And I stayed in the sauna for like 40 minutes and had like the cold showers in between. Then went back to the super hot sauna. Usually it's more than 100 degrees. So I think that definitely helps. And then on top of that, I try to sleep a lot now because I have the time. I mentioned last week that I'm going back to the company where I previously worked in 2 weeks, but until then I'm pretty much off. I mean, I have stuff to do, and I'm doing these videos, and I'm doing some other stuff for my company, but I'm trying to slow it down and finish projects that I still have ongoing while not starting any new major ones. So I have less and less to do, honestly. So that allows me to, sometimes sleep in a little bit and take it more chill. So I think that is gonna help me to recover fast. Plus a lot of tea, a lot of drinking. Really don't understand why some people are so obsessed with going to the doctor whenever they feel a little bit sick or when they have like a sore throat. I have these friends or some colleagues at work previously, like whenever they had a small headache, they would go to the doctor. And basically all the doctor does when somebody like that comes to them is say, okay, you should sleep a lot, you should drink a lot of water, you should, maybe not train, but what else can you do? And then you wait for like 3 days and it's gone, right? So I never understood these people who are a little bit hypochondriac and always overreacting as soon as they feel a little bit ill. I feel like 99.9% of all normal diseases like fever and getting a cold and all these things can be cured with just drinking hot tea and sleeping enough. Nothing else needed. Maybe I should become a doctor. Maybe people would pay me for this great advice that I'm giving here. But apparently people think that's not enough. Apparently people always want to have this edge on their body and just don't give it the time that it sometimes needs in order to recover. I'm trying to avoid this mistake here. On another note, what did I want to talk about? Training when sick, definitely not a good idea, but I think I'm gonna get back on track. Probably middle of the upcoming week. I think I'm gonna be back to training normally, and then I'm gonna make up for the time that I've lost, because my buddy who's living in London right now, he feels like this is his chance to take advantage of me because I'm falling behind on the training schedule that I had for myself. So now he feels like, okay, he has to go twice as hard as he usually would just because he will gain a competitive edge over me. Well, good luck with that, Lars. Not sure you're gonna get there. I'm gonna catch up with you. Don't worry about that. I'm gonna be back on track soon enough. Another thing last week that definitely played a role in me going, saying that I went downhill is said too much, but I definitely went a little bit sideways last week because my girlfriend was not here. She was in the city where she studies for more than a week. So usually what happens when she's not here in our shared apartment is that I really don't have the discipline and willpower to keep the place clean. And what then happens is that as soon as I leave some dirty dishes standing around and I don't put my cups into the dishwasher right after I use them, it immediately becomes more and more. So it has this domino effect that once you just slack off a little bit and you'll let it slide and you're like, I'm gonna do that tomorrow. You postpone it, and you simply don't have the energy to force yourself to do something that you're not super excited about. As soon as you do that, I noticed it has this domino effect, and it even spills over into other areas of your life. So for me, it started with leaving around the dirty dishes, and then I would stop eating as regularly as I do when my girlfriend is around, because she's honestly the one who cooks most of the time. She's a better cook than I am, what can I say? And she kind of likes it. So, as soon as she's gone, 2 days in, I stopped eating as regularly as I would with her. I stopped preparing really healthy meals. Instead, I would go and buy a frozen pizza, which I realize is not good, but you're going down the spiral. Then I would get up a little bit later and go to work, not at 8, but instead at 9. So I really noticed this spillover effect to all these different other areas of my life, and I could really see how this would play out if I lived by myself for a year or 2 years, because I really noticed I don't have that much willpower, at least when it comes to these things. I guess when it comes to other areas of my life or things that I truly care about, like making these videos, for example, then excuse me, then I definitely have willpower, and I would do that regardless of whether she's here or not. But all these things that I don't inherently want to do and that I only do to kind of please her and because I want to be a good boyfriend and not leave the place messy. Sorry. Then yeah, I would just not do that if nobody forces me. Mm. Oh, fuck, my throat is already hurting. Gonna keep this short and tight. But yeah, that again ties back into the accountability buddy that I was talking about last week. And last week, of course, I talked about it in the context of working out and training, as I do with my buddy from London. But it works the same way, essentially, when you're in a relationship. If you are in a healthy relationship, then it should be in a way that you support each other in your goals and aspirations. You support each other to follow each other's dreams, but you should also force each other to do things that you know are good for the relationship and good for you individually, but that you might not be super excited to do. Oh my god. So for me, this is really what an ideal relationship looks like. That you essentially are dating or eventually marrying an accountability buddy. And not necessarily, not in the sense that that person is always nagging you and pushing you and just being annoying and in your face all the time. But in the sense that, as I just said, like you know what the other person needs to do, even when that person doesn't want it to do. And you make sure that person gets that shit done. And that's pretty much what I have with my girlfriend. So that's awesome. And as you can see, now she's back and the place is clean. I actually cleaned it up before she came home. So that's, like good when you fear your girlfriend a little bit. Good when you fear that she's coming home and she might be nagging you if you haven't done the dishes. Another thing that I did last week was that I went straight to Amazon and I ordered a bunch of books. Basically, as soon as I knew that I'm gonna start a regular job again soon and I'm gonna have a regular income coming in with that. So I figured, okay, what can I do with this money that I don't even have yet, but that I'm gonna get soon? And I went to Amazon and I bought plenty of books. Got 5 here, and I have another delivery coming soon because they send it from Germany. Like there's no Amazon here in Sweden, so they always need to order it from the UK or from Germany. So it takes a little while. But I think it's saying something about me. I hope. I like to believe it says something about me that as soon as I get a little bit money, I would spend it on books and reading and educating myself, because all of these are non-fiction books. It's all pretty much related to personal development, and I'm gonna explain in a second which books I bought so you guys can check them out as well in case you're interested. But I really do feel, or I felt the previous year, the last 12 months, that I had to cut back on a lot of expenses because I didn't have that regular income with my startup, with my company. And that led to me also cutting the money that I would spend on books and on education. And this is truly what I miss the most. I mean, there are other things as well. I'm gonna upgrade my wardrobe a little bit as soon as I have that first paycheck coming in. Because there are definitely some clothes that are simply falling apart. I don't even have a winter jacket right now, which is pretty stupid when you live in Sweden during November and December. And I mean, here I am complaining about a sore throat, right? Everyone who's listening to this now is like, duh, I mean, you don't have a proper winter jacket, what do you expect to happen, right? So I'm definitely gonna get that, maybe even today. Maybe I buy it with future money, just like those books. Because you really need a winter jacket here. So there are these kind of expenses, but with the books, I really felt like this is something that I need to have, and something that I dearly missed when I didn't have as much cash lying around as I usually have. At least enough to afford a couple of books. I was never the kind of guy who got off on buying huge flat screen TVs. I never really was into technology that much, even though I enjoy my MacBook because I needed to edit my videos. And actually, I'm gonna upgrade my smartphone soon. I'm gonna get a new phone because the one that I have now is like 3 years old. And even back then, it was kind of old. It's a Samsung S4 Mini, if you guys can even remember that model. I think it came out like 2013. So there are definitely these kind of things that you just need, like gadgets and whatever. But usually I'm not too much into that kind of stuff. I don't spend a lot of money in general. I think otherwise I simply would not have survived the last year. But now that I have this money soon coming in, I felt like, okay, books. That's what I want to invest in. And I think that's a good way to go because you get so much out of it and you never get tired of it. Like, I don't know, when you buy a new computer game, you played, 10 hours, 20 hours, and then you get kind of bored and you don't use it again and you buy a new one. With books, I have books that I read like 5 times because I always get something new out of it. And also I developed so much and I grew so much that if I take it into my hands a year later and I start reading it again, I make connections to my own life and also experiences that I had throughout that year that I didn't have before. So I really think books are one of the greatest investments that you can make. Also because, of course, you learn something and that will stick with you for the rest of your life, hopefully. So, without further ado, which books did I buy? Number 1, The 4 Agreements. Now, this is a book that I honestly didn't know anything about when I bought it, except that it has been on the Amazon bestseller list, especially for non-fiction books, for years now. You can check it out on Amazon. I think since 2014 at least, it's been in the top 10 of most sold books every single consecutive year. So that's pretty crazy, I think. And it is obviously about personal development, or at least loosely related to it. It's called Wisdom Book, whatever that means, right? And the author is, I'm gonna butcher that name. I would pronounce it Don Miguel Ruiz. I don't know. You can check it out yourself. The 4 Agreements. I'm still not entirely sure what it's about. The way I understand it, it's a Mexican guy who is, very spiritual dude, who talks about 4 agreements that you should make with yourself in order to live a satisfied and peaceful life, and a life where you are in complete harmony with yourself and with the environment around you. That's how I understood like the text basically on the back and the first 20 pages that I already read. Honestly, I'm usually skeptical about books like that because I'm not so much into spirituality. There is a huge overlap with personal development and spirituality, but I always felt like that's more a problem than a benefit to the field of personal development because it gets a bad rep. There's a lot of people who are very logical thinking and kind of scientific about the way they approach life in general. And they really don't get a lot out of books like that, the 4 Agreements. They like more practical, scientifically proven stuff. And then if you try to get these people interested in personal development, they associate it automatically with these more spiritual parts of personal development that they can't really relate to. And honestly, I can't relate to that as much either. But I figured, okay, gonna widen my horizon a little bit here. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there who like this book. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so popular on Amazon. And I feel the fact that I work in personal development and I do these videos, I try to share knowledge with other people, I share advice with other people. that kind of requires me to know what is out there, right? Even if you don't agree with the stuff, even if you feel like it's not as valuable as some other people might think, you still have the responsibility to know what is out there. It's similar to a guy who, I don't know, is a doctor. If you're a doctor, I think you have a responsibility to just keep yourself updated about new research and new science and new, maybe even alternative ways of treating certain diseases. Just because that's your job. That's your job. You have to know what is out there and what is the best solution for the patient. Even if you feel like some parts of it might not be good for the patient, or you wouldn't recommend it, or you can't really resonate with it, you disagree with it, you still have to at least know about it. So that's how I feel about my field, personal development, and that's why I bought this book. Maybe if I like it, I'm gonna do a review about it in a future video. If I don't like it, probably I'm gonna read it this upcoming week. If I don't like it, I'm gonna let you know in the next podcast next Sunday. Next, we have The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. She is a personal development coach. She is mostly an author, as far as I know. So she doesn't do a lot of speaking gigs, not these huge engagements like at big conferences where she speaks to thousands of people, like some other gurus and coaches in the personal development realm. I think this book actually has been her first bestseller, and after that she had a couple more, all related to happiness. The reason why I got into this book and why I eventually ordered it was that I did this Yale University course about happiness. I mentioned that in a previous podcast. And they had a bunch of books that they referenced and a bunch of books that they recommended. And this was one of the main ones. Like, it came up again and again and again in the lessons. So I figured, okay, gonna buy it, gonna check it out. I'm gonna see if I agree with the stuff, if I get something out of it. I'm getting more and more interested in happiness because there's just so much that goes into that. And it's so complex because happiness means something differently for basically every person. But I think I talked about this in a previous podcast. So I'm not gonna go down this rabbit hole, but I am gonna check out this book, gonna read it, and probably gonna tell you what I thought of it. I think her approach is pretty practical as far as I got from the reviews. Like here on the front page it says, The Happiness Project, or why I spend a year trying to sing in the morning, clean my closets, fight right, read Aristotle, and generally have more fun. So it sounds like an approach that is very feasible for regular folks who want to implement stuff and routines into their daily life in order to become a little bit happier. Looking forward to reading that. Next one, another one about happiness. Yeah, I went a little bit crazy with the happiness thing lately. This one is by Daniel Gilbert, and it's called Stumbling on Happiness. Now, obviously, I also got it from the Yale course. That guy, Daniel Gilbert, also has a wildly popular TEDx talk that you can check out on YouTube. I think it's also called Stumbling on Happiness, literally. I don't know if the book is based on the TED Talk or the TED Talk is based on the book. To be fair, I haven't checked out the TED Talk yet either, so I'm gonna do that. And I'm definitely gonna read that book. So this guy is a scientist. He has a lot of people recommending this book on the front page here. Malcolm Gladwell, who's a favorite author of mine. Then Stephen Levitt, who is the co-author of Freakonomics, if you have read that in the past. Also one of my favorite books. So if these guys are saying this is a good guy and this is a good book, then that's reason enough for me to order it off of Amazon. And as I mentioned before, I like the scientific approach. I like when people who actually did research on shit then take the time to write a book about it rather than what a lot of people do, that they basically just write about what they feel like and what they think the world should be like, and then they make a book out of it. And surprisingly, a lot of people would buy that as well. They just basically buy the opinion of a single dude. But I prefer these kind of books where some research has been conducted, often over many years, and then you can actually learn all the findings that they have accumulated. Next one, another blind buy, I would say. It's called You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. And the description is how to stop doubting your greatness and start living an awesome life. Which is a description that possibly could not be any more generic, I guess. Especially when it comes to personal development. But again, this is a book that has been on the bestseller list for many years in a row on Amazon. And again, same argument as with the 4 agreements. I felt like it is my job to simply know what's out there, form an opinion about it, and then when somebody asks me about these books or mentions them, at least I do have my own opinion. And I can say, okay, I didn't like it and it's because this and this and this, or I did like it and it's because this and this and this. That's generally the approach that I take with fields that I'm interested in. I want to form my own opinion, even if that means that I have to spend money buying books that I don't end up liking. But let's see, let's give it a fair shot. Gotta keep you updated what this book is like. And then last but not least, maybe you're already familiar with this or have seen it around, because it is it is the sensation of this year, I would say, at least when it comes to the personal development realm, but probably in our internet pop culture and YouTube in general. Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. Sorry, I have to drink a little bit more tea here. So here it says over 1 million copies sold on the cover. Actually, I think by now it's like 3 million is the last number I read. And probably most of you guys have heard about Jordan Peterson or know him from his own videos and the great amount of interviews that he has given in the last 12 months. So he's a professor in clinical psychology from Canada, and he originally got famous by rejecting the idea that it is mandatory by law to call transgender people with their preferred pronoun. That was a law that they came up with in Canada and they wanted to pass. I think they actually did pass it in the end. But Jordan Peterson was a guy who rejected that idea because he said that as soon as you start controlling language by law, like when the state starts controlling language, this is pretty much going down the road of dictatorship, and this is what you've been seeing in countries like Russia and China, North Korea, maybe Cuba, like these communist countries that all eventually failed in one way or another, both politically and economically and socially. And he says this is often the first step into that direction. Now, you can agree and disagree with that. You can say that this is a rather small step, and also a step where you try to be as inclusive for minorities in a society, so it's not actually excluding someone from society. But on the other hand, I kind of get his point. And then that was 2016 that happened, that Bill and that Jordan Peterson first got a little bit more media attention. And then last year he got a lot more attention because he kind of became this spokesperson against political correctness, against social justice warriors. And then, of course, he got attacked by a lot of very left-wing people who said, okay, he's actually a voice for the alt-right, which he always denied and which I don't believe is true at all. I don't see him that way. I see him as a person who makes a lot of sense in a lot of things that he says. Sometimes he doesn't make sense, and then it's good to be aware of that, and it's good to disagree with that. But in general, I feel like he has a lot of good points. I watched a lot of videos with him. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast a couple of times. He basically toured the world the last 12 months. He took a sabbatical from teaching in, I think, I forgot which university he teaches in Canada, but he basically left the university for 12 months and has been traveling the world, giving lectures to people all across the globe, has been giving interviews, has been doing podcasts, has published and first written, then published this book, promoted it all over. Now it's at 3 million sold copies, and it's basically a self-help book. Sorry, my speaking is a little bit messed up today. Self-help book. So I have to read it. And he probably does have a very logical and scientific approach because that's just the kind of person that he is. On top of that, he's really into mythology and the Bible and just ancient stories, which he says explains or helps to explain a lot of the things that we see in our society these days. Archetypes that people are living up to be, archetypes that represent certain roles that certain people take in our society and in our community. So he brings a lot of that into the book that he's written here, and I think it's going to be an interesting read. It's by far the thickest book out of the 5. Has like 400 pages, I think. Close to 400. And I already started the book a couple of months ago in Swedish, and then I switched to English because it was simply too hard to understand in Swedish, like Swedish translation. So I think it's going to be a challenge to get through this, but simply because the guy has been blowing up so extremely, I felt like I have to have read his book. Otherwise, I don't have a fully informed opinion about him. Hope it's not too loud for you guys when I'm blowing my nose, but there's really no other way around it. Don't want to turn off the camera every time I do that. So yeah, those are the 5 books that I bought. And you might be surprised by how many of them are actually books that I don't have any opinion about yet. No pre-informed opinion, at least. And then actually some of them I'm pretty critical towards, especially the 4 Agreements and the You Are a Badass, because one sounds very spiritual and one sounds super general, and exactly the kind of book that is basically based on your feelings. But I think that's a good approach. I think it's really important that you expose yourself to points of views that are not your own. And actually I had a very interesting discussion with that with a friend of mine on Monday. We had fika together, Swedish saying, you basically get together and have coffee. So we sat in this cafe for 2 hours, and he told me that lately he has been making a routine out of listening to podcasts where he knows that he disagrees with the people. And not just with the guest, maybe it's a podcast with like changing guests, but actually with the entire premise of the podcast, the ideology behind it, the values that the host of the podcast represents. He is looking basically for people who have a completely different point of view on things than he does, who are completely on the other side of the spectrum. And he says he listens to that on his way to work, on his way home, sometimes during work. And he says he actively tries to not get pissed off. Like he's trying so hard to not get angry at the people, but actually listen to what they have to say and actually try to understand where they're coming from. So, just gonna get some more tea here. So this really got me thinking that, first of all, more people should do that. And secondly, that I should do that more. Like, I know I don't do that to the extent that I should. First of all, for the reason that I like to agree with people, and pretty much all humans are like that. We like to surround ourselves with people that we can agree with, so we can confirm our opinions and views on things, which then is pretty much a confirmation bias. But also because I don't like to get pissed off. Like I don't like when I'm listening to people and the entire time I just have this voice screaming in my head like, oh my God, shut up. How can you be so dumb? How can you believe in that? How can you think that? And there are extreme examples, of course, like, I don't know, flat earth movement and a lot of this like social justice warrior kind of stuff that happened in the last couple of years. Really gets me agitated and triggered a little bit, to use some internet lingo. So instead of exposing myself to that, I usually avoid it. But not this buddy of mine. And he said that he actually learned a little bit. Like he changed his opinions on some matters. But most of all, he learned a lot about himself. And he learned that he's not as calm as he likes to believe. And he learned that he's not also not as informed as he likes to believe about himself. Because what he says is that he would make a mental exercise out of trying to debunk the things that these people that he initially disagrees with are saying on these podcasts. So he makes a mental exercise to kind of get into a hypothetical argument with these people in his head. So when these people bring an argument, he would immediately try to think of the counter argument and try to think about what he would say if he was sitting face to face with them and having a discussion. So that, he said, really trained his mind and trained his brain and made him realize that oftentimes he would not have a really good and valid argument, but instead he would just he would just form an opinion. He would just have an opinion about something and not actual facts to support that opinion. So I think that's a good thing to explore about yourself and a good thing to realize, because it makes you realize that your opinions are just as fragile and vulnerable as the opinions of most other people. And if you don't want it to be like that, then you do have to go the extra mile, and you do actually have to read more books, and you have to inform yourself more. You have to make sure that also the people that you listen to who form your opinion positively and who support your ideas, who are on your side, quote unquote, that these people are not just speaking out of their ass and sharing their opinion with the world, but they actually need to have good arguments that you can then adopt and that you can use if you ever get into an argument with somebody about these topics. So I just felt like that's a very interesting way to approach learning in general, to expose yourself to things that you disagree with initially. I definitely don't do that enough. I do it more with books than with videos and with podcasts, but I guess I should do that more. You know, read Breitbart a little bit. Read all this right-wing bullshit, and not so that I can find out that I agree with them, because I don't, but so that I can train my brain and figure out how I could disagree with them if I went face to face with them. And I think that's a very good exercise for anyone out there who wants to become better at arguing, wants to become better at thinking rationally, and who wants to train their brain to not just follow the emotions and run with it, but actually take a second to reflect on things and form an articulate argument. All right, what else do we have? It's been like half an hour now, I think, with the podcast, so that's already pretty good. And I think I've covered everything that I wanted to talk about. Yes, books that I ordered, meeting friend who listens to things he hates. Sounds like a good point to talk about. All right, so I guess that was it already for this week. Sorry, I cut it a little bit short, but I don't want to annoy you too much with the husky voice that I have. And instead, I'm gonna rest it a little bit, drink some more tea today, have a very relaxed Sunday, maybe go out and buy a jacket so I don't get more sick. Jesus, what a dumb thing to not have a jacket in Sweden in November. Anyway, enjoy your Sunday. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I try to step it up every single week. So I'm happy to get some feedback from you guys, positive or critical. Either way, I try to learn from it. I try to make it as entertaining and as informative as possible. So that being said, have a good Sunday and talk to you soon. Bye.